Hello, everyone, and welcome to a coordinated virtual background episode of Outside of the Box. And I am here with Team Ribbot, and we are excited to talk about the episode last week where they crushed the competition and won the bracket. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Awesome. So I have to say that when I first saw this bracket, I looked at all of the robots in the bracket, and no like shade to anyone else because there were a lot of good robots in the bracket, but it probably took me 5 seconds and I was like, okay, Ribbot's gonna win. That was just my personal Ribbot fan biased opinion, and the preview that Battlebots put out of Double Jeopardy shooting Ribbot in the face did not fool me for 1 second.
Yeah, there's been a lot of actually confusion about that on the internet, it seems, because the gas is what actually disintegrated the head, but they did actually hit us, and I kind of wish BattleBots highlighted the fact that the projectile made contact with us, but I think they thought it would be better TV if it seemed like they just shot the head off, so they went with that.
Probably, everybody was like, oh, wow, I mean, it was cool. Like, don't get me wrong, it was cool, but I saw it and I was like, no, like they're still working, their weapons work, it's fine. Like they're still gonna win this match. So, very, very kind of, misleading a little bit, but I definitely knew what was gonna happen there. So let's just kind of go right into that match. I know I did read your little breakdown of, your input on the matches that you had, so I know a little bit about what, your take on it was, but I'm curious, obviously in the beginning, there was that little bit of a stare down. And, when I was seeing that, I was like, are they daring Double Jeopardy to shoot them? Like, what's going on here? I mean, was that part of your plan, is to let them let it rip and then go straight for attacking them?
Well, do one of you guys want to talk about what our frontal armor config is with the undercutter?
Yeah, so the undercutter is like, besides the vert with the wedge, it's definitely one of the more well-armored modules. We have a bent piece of AR on the front and then about an inch of aluminum. That is like the structure of the undercutter. So we're pretty confident in that taking hits. The design of it is really kind of from the uppercut match after our old undercutter got blown to pieces. So yeah, we were definitely pretty confident that it would be able to take the shot from Double Jeopardy.
And yeah, that's why I think they kind of said it in the pre-interview, which at the time I hadn't heard, but it makes a lot of sense, is their best opportunity to take a shot at us is if we're trying to strafe around them and we give them like the side of the robot. So the easiest way to prevent that is if you just, point the front of the robot at them. The secondary reason, which I don't know if we're supposed to talk about, but we'll talk about it anyways, is we were told by production that Double Jeopardy only had probably one fight this season, and everybody wants to see them actually get a shot off. So they requested that we were slow in the beginning and actually let them take a direct shot at us.
It was fun. Definitely a fun moment. Did we?
Yeah, tell him we'll be right back. His
okay.
Computer's having trouble.
Cool, no worries. So yeah, and I mean, also interesting to fight a robot that hadn't been in BattleBots since 2019. Obviously they were going to come back and try and put on a good show, and they did for that shot, and then Riba kind of went to town on their robot. There were definitely a lot of guts hanging out all over the BattleBot floor, but I think it was still a fun match, and Ribbot did the job.
Yeah. Actually, Nikolai, we want to talk a little bit about the noise, about the actual shot.
Noise?
The Double Jeopardy shot.
Oh, yeah. So it was kind of weird. Like when you're at the box, like everything, like all the noise from the crowd and everything kind of just fades away when you're looking at two robots. Like for me, this was my first season with the team at the box. So like it was pretty cool to be standing right next to it while everything was happening. So like from my perspective, it was super, super quiet. But all of a sudden, it just sounded like the entire world just broke. the sound was massive, and that's coming from inside inside the battle box where everything is sealed inside all this this polycarbonate. It was, yeah, you could feel it shaking a little. Yeah, it was pretty nuts.
Yeah.
Christina, a quick technical point. Can you unmute him? I think he's auto muted.
Let me see. No, definitely not auto muted.
Tim just doesn't know how to use the mute button. But kind of following on what Nick Han said is, I remember after the match. So during the match, I don't actually remember the shot at all. I just remember like the moments afterwards, because as the driver, the thing I have to focus on after anything happens in the box is where's Ribbot, where's the opponent, is Ribbot okay? Those are like the thought process that goes through my head. So I don't remember the shot at all. However, after the match, I do remember during my interview, I couldn't hear anything. I just heard like ringing in my ears because that shot was loud. That was a loud shot.
Yeah, I mean, I like seeing the slug laying there in the arena. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's but I mean, it's pretty, it's pretty big. Like I would imagine that having, shooting that off is going to make a big noise and have at least some impact. And like you said, it did hit the robot. It's just you couldn't really tell.
Yeah, it's, if you watch the slow motion, you can see a very faint spark where it makes contact with our AR hedge. But also Tim is saying that he's still having problems with the mute button.
Yeah,
he thinks it's on the host. It says he doesn't have permission to unmute.
Weird.
But yeah, I'm actually surprised they didn't do a super slow motion and kind of zoom in on where it made impact, because I think the fans at least would really have appreciated a slightly more clear and obvious indication that they hit us. Oh, Tim's trying again.
Yeah, probably best. No worries. So yeah, hopefully he can unmute now.
There you go.
Yeah.
Nice.
Woo.
Hi, everybody.
No worries. So yeah, so let's kind of go into a few matches that you weren't a part of, but just to, obviously get your take on that. The next match in the episode was Slamo versus Malice, which maybe some people were surprised that was a back and forth match as much as it was. I wasn't. I love Slamo. I think that it's a great robot, and I mean, Malice obviously very powerful, really great weapon. But I thought that it was a great match. It was probably one of my favorite matches in the episode. I think Craig did a really good job controlling things up until the point where Slamo kind of got in a weird position and then lost a wheel. And he was able to come back after that and still do some things until Slamo lost the other wheel. And then there's not a whole lot that he can do from there. So what did you guys think about that match?
Well, I think Craig posted about how he wasn't using the wheels that he wanted to be using, right? And I think that match could have potentially gone very differently if his wheels hadn't just kind of exploded the second they got touched. We were definitely preparing for the possibility of having to fight Slamo. Obviously, us looking at the bracket at the event, once we were done with Double Jeopardy, we kind of had to just wait before we could set up for whoever our next opponent was. And going into it, I think we were pretty like 50-50 on it, because I know Slamo isn't necessarily the most consistent bot in the world, but when it works, it is still like a big wedge, which generally works against horizontal spinners.
Did anybody else have any other opinions on that?
I mean, David summed it up pretty well. Like I don't remember watching the match when I was there, but everyone was getting both configs ready for the next matchup, whether we went against Malice or Slamo.
Yeah, I think also a really weird thing when you're at the event and your robot's like involved in the stakes. I find it a lot harder to make like the right calls or determine like, oh yeah, absolutely this robot's gonna win, because like you're in it and it just gets a lot harder. You're like, oh, but what if this happens? What if that happens? Yeah.
It's definitely everything's a lot more clear when you're watching the episode back, but in the moment you're just like, the thing that you think isn't going to happen is definitely going to happen, and then you're not going to be ready for it.
Yeah, yeah, you never know. I mean, especially when it's in the tournament format, because when it's just the normal season, I think it might be a little bit different. But you know, when you're in a tournament, you're always preparing. Okay, who may I potentially fight in the future? So that's it's a little bit, you know, you have to kind of keep your eye on that more than normal.
I
So
think
yeah,
Malice is also particularly scary for us because Malice is the first, I guess technically second. We don't talk about Valkyrie. They're technically the first horizontal spinner we've ever fought in an actual match. So that was going to be, I mean, kind of an unknown for us. Whereas Slamo, being control bot, all we did all season was fight control bots. So I think we were well prepared to fight another control bot.
yeah, I would say so. When like, I find that when you tend to get the same type of bot the whole season, then by the end of it, you're kind of the expert on it. So, yeah, it could have been interesting though. But with the other matches, I mean, I'm sure that you may not have been, you know, thinking about those as immediately because you weren't going to fight those bots next anyways. But let's kind of talk about Pain Train versus Shatter. You know, when I was looking at that matchup, I was thinking to myself, it could go either way. I think, you know, if Pain Train's weapon continues to work well, they obviously are going to have a much better chance of pulling something out. But I think the problem for me looking at that matchup was the most effective way to take out Shatter is to go after their hammer. And I don't think that Pain Train is necessarily configured in the best way to do that, you know, because they're not like a bigger, taller bot or have like a massive weapon like Deep Six or, you know, something like that. So it's a little bit different for them. You know, in the beginning, Pain Train managed to kind of pop them a few times and took one of those wedgelets off. But the problem with fighting Shatter is that you have to get near the hammer. Like it's hard to not do that. And that's really what did Pain Train in is just so many brutal shots from that hammer. And you know, that they could only sustain so much. I mean, it did go to a judge's decision, but obviously they got quite beat up from that.
Yeah, I don't actually know. I don't know if either of you two know what happened to Pain Train's weapon. Yeah, okay. I don't know if I asked Evan afterwards. However, backing up the question one step, who did you think was going to win the bottom side of the bracket?
The bottom side of the bracket?
Yeah, so not our half, the other half.
Actually, I had picked all of the matches correctly. So
nice.
I had picked them all correctly.
Yeah, I know when we were going into it, we were really fearful of the two overhead bots, right? So Huge and Shatter, we were really hoping they wouldn't make it out of that side of the bracket because Riba is not necessarily the best armored up top. So those two pose quite the threat from overhead attacks. That being said, when Deep Six did inevitably win that side of the bracket, we didn't exactly have a sigh of relief. But yeah, I think I don't want to say we got lucky because I don't know how those matches would have gone, but I think we were all pretty happy that the two overhead bots didn't end up having to face us.
Yeah, I mean, Shatter and Huge are just so scary, especially like Shatter is not afraid to swing the hammer. They're really well armored. They have wedgelets. Mm-hmm. They're one of those robots that can kind of really hit you on all three of the categories. Like they can control you, they can damage you, and like they're super aggressive. And then Huge is like his weapon's been devastating this season, so would have been pretty terrifying figuring out how to armor up the top of Ribbot.
We may have ended up looking like retrograde after that match.
Maybe. Yeah, well, it's so funny because like with that side of the bracket, I don't think that there really were many good options at all. But yeah, and I really want to talk about that Deep Six versus Huge match because number one, it spawned so many memes. But you know, like Huge was definitely moving in some ways and doing some things that I don't normally see. You know, that's probably something that I'd have to talk to Jonathan more about, you know, because he would know the most about what his robot was doing, but it, you know, kept kind of coming up on the side, and he just didn't really seem to have a lot of control over it after those initial like interactions with Deep Six. I mean, did that match go the way that you guys thought it was going to go?
I personally thought Deep Six had that. I think Jonathan has somebody on the inside who really doesn't like him, because Huge is designed to break the meta, and I think all the builders are really happy that there's a robot that is designed to kill the bite forces of the field, right? Everyone wants to see Huge do exactly that. Everyone wants to see Huge fight a 4-wheel drive vert and show it that a 4-wheel drive vert literally can't do anything to him. And he can just beat the crap out of them for 3 minutes. That's what it's built to do. So he ends up fighting Uppercut, who is not a small vert, and then he ends up fighting Deep Six, who is, you know, also not a small vert. So I think
both who can touch Huge's chassis.
Yes, he was given the 2 verts, like 2 of the only verts in the competition who can direct hit Huge. Yeah, I mean, I felt pretty bad for him, and I kind of figured it would go the way of Deep Six just because he has the reach advantage. He can direct hit Huge where Huge really doesn't want to get hit. But that being said, Jonathan still did a pretty good job. The match was actually pretty close. So, yeah.
He kept it going as much as he could. It's, you know, like, as I've always said, when Deep Six can, you know, kind of sustain the control of their robot and their weapon is working, like, it's super devastating. I mean, there's really not much that a whole lot of people can do against it. You know, to me, like, it's like fighting a helicopter, kind of. And so it's just, it's difficult. I mean, it was an entertaining match. But yeah, I felt really bad for Jonathan because, I mean, it's hard that match was so tough for him. You know, but yeah, I figured Deep Six was going to pull that out. I mean, when I had Jonathan on my show and I was talking to him, obviously like low key because people didn't know about those matches and stuff. But I mean, he kind of hinted at some things, and I was like, yeah, it sounds like that might be an interesting match there. So, you know, obviously we know what went down. So going into that next round, Riba versus Malice. What was your thoughts, you know, going into that? I want to note that I loved the little designs on the robots, you know, that Malice had their little Ribbot design. I mean, you guys kind of do that anyways a lot, you know, do things to take on the characteristics of the robots that you're fighting, which I think is fantastic. But yeah, let's kind of talk about that match. I do know that they were having weapon issues, and that kind of played into some things there. So that, and then I also want to know, they were talking about the announcers were talking about thinking that you strategically shut down your weapon during that match. Did you strategically shut down your weapon, or was that just like?
Yeah, so, you know, we went into that match knowing that we wanted to get our first ever judge's decision win, so we turned off the weapon just to make sure we don't knock them out. Of course, that was our strategy.
We don't like knockouts.
Nico, you want to tell the truth behind what happened?
Yeah. So I guess I'll back up a little bit first. But this fight was, I think, what David said earlier, is the first time we've ever actually fought horizontal. Like, we fought Valkyrie our first season, but we turned off, so it wasn't really much of a fight. So I think we've made, how many wedges have we made at this point? 4, 5?
We've made a new wedge every season.
Yeah, we made a new wedge every season.
In 2020, we made 2 wedges in one season.
Yeah, but this is the first time that we've ever actually run one. So Christian, the guy who's been working on the wedges for the past few seasons, is like, yes, we finally get to test one of the wedges I made, and it worked pretty well. Unfortunately, so we make custom weapon motors and ESCs, and unfortunately, some of the components on the ESC sheared off the board. So one of the sides of the motor, or one of the sides of our weapon drive, went out. So we were still able to spin kind of slowly, but we didn't want to give Malice the chance to spin up. I know they were running their heaviest blade, so some of the times when their weapon looked like it wasn't working, it actually, like, it was fine. They just didn't have the time to spin up. I think we did eventually shatter one of their bearings. I think that was some of the damage they reported afterward. But
yeah, I mean, also to David's driving, like David never really gave Malice a chance to get away or like gave them any time. Like he was just staying there, like pressed up on the weapon, not letting them spin up.
Yeah.
Which is like if you've ever fought a horizontal in beetles, it's like really strong because beetles struggle to spin up, like especially big bars. But yeah,
I thought it was quite the interesting play that Malice was having issues spinning up. So okay, we got sort of a backstory about why they ran. What do they call it? Big Red. I think that's what they call their spinner.
Big Red.
Yeah,
I think they call it Big Red. But
so,
we got the story behind it because I thought it was a weird time to choose to run your heaviest blade when you know you're having spin up issues. Those kind of are opposite mentalities. But according to the team, I think they ran it because they thought that was going to be their last match of the season. And they wanted to run Big Red in at least one fight for the whole season because they hadn't run it yet in the normal tournament or in the bounties. So they wanted to get one fight with it because it's kind of their signature blade.
it is their logo. So
yeah. So I guess that's why they ran it. But I thought it was kind of interesting for them to go with their slowest spinning up blade while they're having spin up issues. After as Nikom said, a lot of the components came off our motor controllers for our weapon motors to the point where after the match, we could flip the module over and literally shake components out of it off the ground. So it coming back was nothing short of a miracle. We're not entirely sure why it came back, but it did come back. It was not intentionally shut off, but I guess the judges thought it was intentionally shut off. Either way, I do hope we would have won that judge's decision regardless, because we kind of bullied Malice around for 3 minutes.
And that's exactly the word that I would have used. I mean, it was Riba very much turned into a control bot for a large portion of that match. I mean, it was just like insane what you were able to do in that regard. But yeah, I would have liked to think that the judge's decision would have gone to you regardless. So and I'll be talking to the judges later this month, so maybe I can ask them.
Sometimes weapons come back, even if we don't want them to. We weren't trying to get them to come back. I mean, we want them to come back, but it's sometimes just magic.
Yeah, for sure. So then the other match was Deep Six versus Shatter. For me, I thought it was interesting because Shatter's in a way already at a disadvantage because Deep Six doesn't have a lot of surface area to hit. There's the sides, obviously like hitting those would be bad, but it's hard. You have to be really like strategic and specific about where you're hitting the hammer. And then the other part of that is having to get close to Deep Six's weapon, which is never a great idea. I actually thought that the hammer might come off. Like I thought that there might be a hit that happens and that hammer comes off. The other thing that I thought was interesting in that matchup is that at the end, Shatter didn't seem to agree with the count out finishing because they started to have some movement there at the end. So what did you guys think about all of that? Because I know that you're no stranger to having a count out where it's questionable as to whether that should occur. So
I mean, I think unfortunately it's pretty cut and dry of if we're going to say that our Hydra count out was a consistent by the books count out, there's no way Shatter had controlled movement. They were moving way less than we were. Sure, they were translating, but they started in the corner, and by the time it took them like a full minute to get to the kill saw from the corner, which is that's not controlled movement. Also, on that front, Deep Six had both wheels working and their weapons at full speed. I don't know what judge's decision they thought they were going to win if they didn't get counted out, but at that point, I don't think they had scored any damage points against Deep Six. They certainly scored some aggression points, but I don't think they had any control points either at that stage of the fight. I do think that if they want to change the rules, that any kind of controlled movement, no matter how slow, is still controlled movement, then they shouldn't have been counted out. But based on what they're counting other people out for, I think Shatter's amount of movement was not enough to constitute continuing the match. You guys have any other hot takes on that?
Oh, I mean, I have plenty of hot takes on that one. One thing that you'll see from us in this whole episode is we're like pretty strict on adhering to that. Like if in deep, to jump ahead a little bit, like in our fight against Deep Six, in our fight against Malice, like when robots stop moving, like we're just kind of backing off and letting the rules play out unless they move again.
Yeah, I think a lot of it seemed to me like a lot of the frustration from Adam was that he was stuck on something. Like his robot was beached on some component that had fallen on the floor and gotten stuck on the magnets on the underside of Shatter. So yeah, so he wasn't. I don't know if he was sure it was like he was stuck on the box or if he was stuck on something on the floor, but he was hoping that there would be some sort of exception for him being stuck. And kind of backing up again, like you were saying that you thought the hammer was going to come off. I forget who told me this, but the Shatter team apparently put a ton of time into redesigning their hammer so that they could just full send into any weapon and not be afraid of it coming off. And it seems to have worked.
They full sent it into the weapon. So yeah, so that's pretty good.
It's a pretty good test.
Yeah, and if you want to talk about durability, Shatter's arm also just like maybe it wasn't perfectly straight, but it was still functional. It was still swinging at pretty much full power after all of that. And I think adding on to what Nikom was saying about them being stuck on something, specifically with the design of Shatter, it's even worse because Adam could clearly see that all 4 of his wheels were still spinning, right? So it's really frustrating if you can see that your robot's still working, but you can't move. And I imagine that played into the whole, like, I can still fight, I'm just stuck on something.
Yeah. I mean, like, you know, I know there's some people that agree with me and some that don't, but I mean, I personally really like the NHRL rules where there's the tap out button, and like as long as the robot's moving, you keep fighting unless you press the tap out button and say I'm not doing it anymore. You know, because then that takes the subjectivity out of it. You know, like you know that you can continue hitting the robot unless the other team says no. So.
There's no tap outs in Battlebots.
I know. That's what everybody keeps telling me. Except for, well, not that that was a tap out, but except for the time that Tombstone took Gigabyte's head off, and then you know they were like, nope, we're good. And
well, so
you know,
technically speaking, Ray could have gone in and just destroyed Gigabyte. He's fully allowed to do that. However, I think the builders all have some base level respect for each other. Knowing the number of like the thousands of hours and tens of thousands of dollars everyone puts in, cheap shotting Gigabyte after the shell comes off would not fly.
No.
Ray would lose all respect in the community forever.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So generally speaking, like I don't think Dustin was going to hit a Shatter that wasn't working, unless it was like there was a chance that the fight was going on. But generally speaking, I don't think that many people take at least non-premeditated cheap shots. A lot of people were pretty unhappy about our axolotl hit in 2020. However, that was discussed by the teams beforehand. So we knew it was going to happen before the match started.
Right, yeah. And I think that, I mean, especially after everybody that I've talked to, I mean, the BattleBots community, everybody is so like, you know, like helps each other and, you know, wants everybody to do well, because that's, everybody wins when everybody like does well and the robot is in top shape. So I definitely can see that being the case, you know, as far as respect and things of that nature. So basically at that point, Deep Six beat Shatter, you guys beat Malice, so you got to take on Deep Six. I mean, I would say that they definitely posed the biggest challenge of that tournament for you. I really liked that you spent a lot of time strategically trying to find the right approach. I mean, I know that there were some fans saying, oh, you have to be aggressive and hit them, but like Deep Six is the type of robot that can one-shot you. Like you just get in there and you're done, and that's not smart. So I think that you guys were being smart by like trying to figure out the right way to approach them.
Yeah, I think it's kind of funny actually. It's kind of a divide after that match. The builders had a much different take than the fans do. Builders see circling, trying to find it open, they see that as aggression usually, right? If you're in if you compete in any of the smaller weight classes, if you're doing donuts around your opponent, that's usually seen as aggression, not as running away. I don't think anybody actually uses circular technique to be as a fear tactic to like run away from your opponent. If they're like fully functioning, usually when you're doing that, you're actually looking for an opening. You're poised to attack. However, the fans see it as you're just running away from conflict because all they want to see is sparks. But I know both Tim and Nick have a perception of what that match was for the entirety of that match. That's similar to mine, but I'm going to let them go with their takes first.
Yeah. So for this match, I actually wasn't able to. I wasn't at the arena for this match. I had to go back to work. So like I knew who we were fighting. I knew how we were going to prepare. And then I got like the video of the match, I don't know, like 3 minutes after it happened. And that was probably the most nerve-wracking fight I've had to watch. Like just terrifying to watch. Because like how hard Deep Six hits. And like most of Riba cannot take a hit like that. So yeah. And definitely like we all the drivers always talk about, oh, I'm gonna get him around him and go to the wheels. Turns out that's a very difficult thing to have to do.
It turns out when you actually try to do it, the fans hate you for it. But that's just how it is sometimes.
Yeah. During the match, everything was clenching. My body was so stiff. Needless to say, I'm glad I wasn't the person driving the robot. I really don't know how David deals with the pressure, but I think you can actually see my face and how excited I am. Like when we actually get a good hit off of Deep Six. Actually, most team members, I think we had a thread in this in our group chat. Like everyone's mouths except for David was just wide open, just screaming.
Yeah, there's our very talented photographer John Bennett got a bunch of photos of the hit, like the actual hit that got the fight going, and I look like I'm not on the same planet as everyone else. But everyone else on the team is freaking out after we finally hit them on the rear. But yeah, I'm not sure what I was doing. I didn't have any reaction at all, apparently. But yeah, okay. I wear a Fitbit, and my Fitbit registered a heart rate of 180 BPM for the entirety of that match.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was pretty high anxiety, high tension, but I got my workout in for the day. Just standing still, I got my workout in for the day.
Yeah, I mean that match was crazy, and again, like at the end, I think that there were people, well, even the announcers were questioning you hanging back and kind of waiting for a count out, but it seemed, like when I was looking at it, I felt very sure that was going to happen. There's definitely been times where I feel like teams have done that and then like paid for it because the count out never came, but of course in this case it did, which I'm sure you were relieved when that happened.
Yeah, we were they cut all of our audio out, which I'm really sad. There was a lot of profanity coming out of my team at the time, but based on what had happened to us and based on what we were seeing from like all the inconsistencies and whatnot, we just assumed that if you lose the side of your drive, you're automatically counted out. Like that's just what they were doing. It doesn't matter how much you can move on one side of drive. If you're missing a side of drive, you're done. So once we took Deep Six's wheel out, we were just screaming at the ref about whether or not he counted that as movement. Yeah, it was pretty, I don't know if I was driving to drive at that point or if I was more focused on yelling at the ref at that point. But I don't know. I think it hit a certain sore spot for us that they weren't just counting people out immediately for losing a side of drive.
Yeah, I'm sure, because that's something that was often coming to my mind during the whole episode, really, because there was so much of the countouts happening or potential countouts happening. So yeah, so you won that match. You beat Deep Six. They had a great run. They really did. That's probably like the best that I've seen their robot look, to be honest. So the fact that you were able to pull that one out is great. You got to go up against Lockjaw, which, you know, obviously like Donald's been doing this like longer than you've been alive. So it's,
I
you know,
thought it was funny he added that note, but one person on the team has a, oh no, at the time he was not. So yeah, Donald actually has been competing in Battlebots since before anybody on Ribbot was born. So that was cool.
yeah. I mean, like, despite the fact, obviously he's very experienced, he's very good, like he's an amazing driver, you know, but again, my first thought when I was thinking about that matchup was it's tire chomping time. Because I mean, like Lockjaw just has those big juicy tires that are perfect for your spinner. I mean, it's just a matter if you can get to them, you know, because Donald's such a good driver. You were able to do that pretty fast and efficiently, because the match didn't really seem to last very long, at least from the way that it seemed on TV. I don't know. Sometimes when I talk to teams, they give a different perspective on like how long it actually lasted or if it was as quick as it seemed. You know, so kind of take me through what happened from your perspective in that one.
Well, we were, I think I wrote about this on the post briefly, but Lockjaw is very cool because we have seen him run the rear wedge with forks. Like we've seen that configuration before. So Lockjaw was kind of already set up to fight Ribbot. He doesn't care if we're running the undercutter or the vert. He's kind of set up on either end for one or the other. So that was, I don't want to say exciting, but that was interesting for us to think about as a problem, as a concept. However, like you said, big exposed wheels. We really want to maximize our mobility, and whenever we want to do that, the solution automatically is always the undercutter. And then after that, it's pretty much just see what happens when you make contact with that rear wedge. We like touched it and it just shattered. I think it was hard phase, right, guys?
Yeah, so it's the same wedge that he's been running for a while that he just rebuilds back up by welding material back onto it, and then he hard faces it. So that's why we were able to shatter it so quickly. Because like in the past, like when he fought Bloodsport, it was
Sow.
Yeah, and against Valkyrie.
Yeah.
Right.
Or,
So,
against,
and
you know,
against
lots of
Shatter.
big horizontal spinners. Yeah, Captain Shatter, that's the one I was thinking of. It was fine, but like, you know, I guess we got a lucky draw and we came in last and were able to take some chunks off of it.
The undercutter also hits really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. It hits really hard and it hits where we want it to hit. And I think our four-wheel drive wider just chassis base also helps us not destabilize as much as some of the other horizontals. We also run, I found this out recently, we run less than a third the moment that Valkyrie does. So we settle a lot faster. We don't do what a lot of horizontal spinners do where they get into that like procession where they get stuck at a diagonal. We just hit something and then we're planted right back down immediately. And I think that helps us not be as weak against those sloped wedges. Because I actually really think the design of that rear wedge is really clever because it gets the horizontal spinner up at an angle. And most horizontal spinners, once they're up like that, they just stay like that, which exposes them to a free hit. But yeah, frogs don't do that. So yeah, as the match continued, he gave up pretty quick on that rear wedge. He realized it was just cracking, like parts of it were just snapping off. Turned it around, and his forks and his uprights actually held up amazingly. I don't know if either of you two want to go into what those are made of, but they didn't, like, we did not do the damage to that side of the robot that I thought we were going to do.
I'm not too sure what his forks are made of, but his uprights are definitely tight.
Yeah, and not that thick.
Yeah, pretty thin.
Yeah. But yeah, we I think without a dedicated wedge going into the vertical spinner, the undercutter has the advantage running it into some forks. So that contact went about the way we expected it to go. I still don't actually know what broke on Lockjaw and why his drive stopped. I don't know if either of you two talked to the team.
Yeah,
No.
I did not.
something broke. I don't think it was, a lot of people were theorizing it's just the hubs were spinning in the wheels. I don't think that was it. I think something had seized on the inside.
I'm curious too in that match because like different than with the Deep Six situation where you kind of hung back, that at the towards the end there, David, I heard you say if he flinches, I'm gonna hit him again, and he did move just ever so slightly, and you went back in after him kind of as they were counting him down. What was the difference in that match where you decided to go after him versus just hanging back and waiting for the count out?
Nothing against Lockjaw, but I think the potential risk to our bot is a little less than with Deep Six. Deep Six, we hit even when we hit him on the back, he cleaved off the left side of our robot. I don't know, I didn't post any damage picks, but if we had hit Deep Six straight in the middle on that hit, we would have lost that match immediately, because where he hit would have been straight through our weapon batteries, and then our weapon's gone for the rest of the match. So we got pretty lucky, I'd say. Lucky, fortunate, high skill. I did it on purpose. But hitting him off center really saved us, because when he came down backwards on us, he only hit the wheel instead of hitting like the middle of our module. And yeah, going in taking a risky hit on trying to get his other wheel probably wouldn't have been worth it, because even if we hit it, he'll destabilize and you don't know where that blade is going to end up. Whereas Lockjaw is much more set up as like a classic vert.
Yeah,
Lockjaw
in the damage pit, you can see where Deep Six like went through the front of our robot, and he like cut through the armor like it wasn't even there.
Yeah.
We also knew that Lockjaw was going to be running his rear wedge, which meant that his setup for horizontals is going to run his smaller weapon, so less energy. So we were slightly less afraid. We were confident that the undercutter could take the abuse even if it did get hit.
Yeah, and also teeing up at the end of the match is, I guess I would have said the same thing of if Deep Six stopped temporarily and we squared up to him. Maybe a little less likely because it's Deep Six, but most robots, if they pretty much stop, you want to put yourself in a good position to hit them again, but not like, don't take the shot unless you have to.
Yeah, I mean, you did do that against Deep Six when he got up on the screws.
Yeah.
You like came in and hung out waiting for him to come down.
Yeah. And in that case, if Deep Six had never come off the screws, we just wouldn't have hit him. Yeah. So if Lockjaw had just been dead, I mean, effectively he was dead. I guess he didn't actually move. He twitched, but he didn't actually go anywhere. But the idea is you don't want to do any more damage than you have to, but you want to make sure you're positioned to seal the match off if you need to. I do think it's a little funny though. We did square up based on where Lockjaw landed. We were on the wrong side of the robot. So we did hit the side that was already dead, but it seemed to also kill the other side. So I guess it worked out.
Yeah. I mean, I would say it worked out pretty well. I'm actually curious, like looking at everything as a whole, what would you say was you guys' biggest takeaway from like the regular season and the tournament that, maybe you think helped you be really successful in that bracket?
You guys want to give your takes?
Sure.
Well,
You got it, Nick. You got it.
yeah, or at least from my perspective, this is the first time that we've brought our new custom motors to this competition, and so after seeing it go through several fights, especially the fight with Hydra, after we were bouncing all over the place like a 3-pound robot, and the weapon the entire time was still spinning at full speed, like we went into this bracket pretty confident in our robot and the damage that we could deliver.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I think these matches, the strategy we used in each match was like pretty specific to who we were fighting. And it was the right set of decisions that gave us like the highest probability of success in that match. But yeah, it was just great to see the robot, like the drivetrain performing exactly how we expected to, the weapon motors, like just doing a great job. We learned some things in the Malice fight about mounting our electronics.
A lot of hot glue was pulled out after that fight.
Yeah. But
yeah, and I think they both touched on some really important points already. But just looking at the whole season, not just the bounty, or sorry, it's not a bounty anymore, not just the Sin City Slugfest bracket. We were able to pull out every configuration that Ribbot has, and every configuration did what that configuration was designed to do. We ran the best wedges we've ever run in the regular season, and successfully got under both people we need to get under. And we ran our wedge configuration, and it stopped the horizontal from killing us. And we ran the undercutter a whole bunch of times, and it did a lot of undercutter things. That being said, after Lockjaw, and based on how the bounty went, we were feeling really, really good about the undercutter. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. That might play in later in the season, but yeah.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about that. No, I like, as much as obviously I want to see what happens, I want to be surprised, and well, and like, you can't talk about it anyway. So, but yeah, so I mean, like, I think that really this bracket, I mean, like, everybody knows how versatile of a robot Ribbot is, and if they don't know that, then they should know that. It's one of my favorite things, honestly, about Ribbot, just the fact that it's, aside from its fun, and it reminds me of a Pokemon, but you know, like, such a great job in the bracket. Obviously, we'll see how that plays out in the actual Champions tournament in a few short weeks here. I will say, because I have to add this, because I've been thinking about it for probably the last week, that so for me, aside from just being an amazing robot, Ribbot obviously reminds me of two things. Number one is Pokemon, and number two is, I immediately think of, and hopefully you guys are not too young and you've played Super Mario 3, but obviously Mario has had a frog suit. And so now I really want Ribbot to have a Tanuki suit, because I just think that would be fun.
Images have been thrown around recently.
Yeah, there might be
Yeah.
a frog suit this coming season.
Yeah, some theme things might change in this coming season. We'll see. Nothing confirmed yet.
We'll see. It'll be, whatever it is, it'll be fun, I'm sure, because you guys are one of the most fun teams in all of BattleBots.
Thanks. I also hope we see a bigger feature of our frog mascot, which showed up at the end of the bounty, but like got cut, unfortunately, from a lot of shots. Yeah, they didn't do the button. Was it for Lockjaw, Nick?
It was, well, so I feel like it felt like every other fight. Every time we did the button press, I would be holding our, we have this little stuffed toy frog. His name is Hector.
Don't you dare call him a toy. He's our mascot.
Okay, sorry. We have a mascot stuffed frog. And every other match, I would press the button with Hector's hand. And actually in the Lockjaw fight, you can see me squaring up to the button to throw Hector into the button to initiate the button press. And so actually when we were first setting up and all the bots were loading in, we had talked about it in the pits, like, oh, I'm going to throw Hector into the button. And so I did a practice throw, and production had to stop what they were doing so that they could reset the button. So it was like this whole ordeal, and like I got a stern talking to, and they're like, please never do that again.
Yeah, apparently the buttons are live before the match.
Yeah. So yeah, like the lights started to light up and everything. But so when it came time to the actual thing, and they told us to press our button, I missed. So I guess that's why they cut it out. But you can see me starting to square up to the button, holding the frog to throw it.
We're gonna have to set up a fake button in the pits for you to get your arm tuned
Yeah.
in.
I guess so.
I also have to add too, because you know I mention this often, but you know I have a daughter. She's 6. Hopefully she builds BattleBots one day. I don't know. She really loves BattleBots, but Ribbot is one of her favorite bots. I don't know what it is. All of her favorite robots are green. Well, most of them. But in this particular match, so she loves Bunny. Like, she loves Bunny so much. And when you guys beat Malice, she was like, Mom, I'm sad. The frog beat Bunny.
That's adorable.
Oh,
You know, if your daughter wants to send a very nice email over to the execs at Target, I'm sure that would help us out a lot. Because you know, we really want to get Tim. What do you always say? Our fan base really nails down the 8 to 12-year-olds or something,
Yeah.
or maybe a little younger than that. Yeah.
Ribbot plushies. Rusty has started the train rolling. So like, let's get some Ribbot plushies.
We could do. I don't think they're supposed to be squishy though, or like not soft and squishy. I guess Rusty is definitely not supposed to be soft and squishy. But yeah, we'll see. Yeah, a toy of some sort would be cool.
Yeah, there would definitely already be one person purchasing that. So yeah, but like great bracket. I'm so excited to see what happens not only in this tournament, but obviously whenever the next season occurs and we are able to watch all of that goodness. I'm sure that you will bring it for the next season for sure.
So currently, who's your favorite to win the Champions tournament?
That is a tough one because I will tell you that honestly, like after the first episode, I think Will Bales is a man possessed, and it would be hard to stop that because he just looked like he's on a mission.
Mhm.
So I don't know.
That's true. That's true.
No, that was
All right,
definitely
well,
a tough one to follow because we watched that episode and watched Will have like I think one of the best episodes of BattleBots ever.
Yeah.
And like knowing we were the next episode, we were like, oh man.
Our episode is gonna look so lame in comparison.
I mean, it's like nobody does that. Like I don't think it like I've watched BattleBots since forever, and I don't think in a tournament format like a condensed format like that I've ever seen anybody do that before.
Yeah.
So
there's also like destruction, and then there's what Hypershock did, right? Like people do lose by knockout all the time, but they don't lose like that by knockout, right? Valkyrie doesn't lose its disc. Gigabyte, I guess, has lost its shell before, so I guess that one's happened before. And no one has ever disassembled Mad Catter like that. So that was very exciting for us to be watching. When it was happening live, everybody was trembling a little bit.
yeah, like we'll see. Because I mean, I talk about like all of the different teams with everybody all the time just because I love talking about robots and I have, a fun time hearing other opinions. But I mean, like I've often compared it to that it'll be interesting to see just because I feel like in the regular season last year, that aside obviously from a weird anomalous thing in the end game match that Jameson and Sawblaze, that I had that same vibe where he was just like so on a mission to just destroy everyone during the regular season, and then he ended up losing to Witch Doctor in the tournament. So it'll just be interesting because I'm like it gave me that same feeling, and I'm like, okay, so is Will eventually going to hit someone that he just can't do that to? I'll be interested to see.
Yeah, we can't comment on that. So
I know.
It'll be very exciting.
Yeah.
It will be exciting.
So yeah, we'll see. I am so happy to have had you guys on the show. We will definitely have to dedicate an entire episode to Ribbot at some point in the future when we have some more things to discuss. But I appreciate you coming on.
Of course, it's fun. This was definitely, I think, by far the most enjoyable episode for ourselves that we've ever been able to watch. So yeah.
Yeah. So, again, for everybody who is watching the show, I appreciate you, giving the show some love. Please make sure that you like, subscribe, follow the page, all of that good stuff. And there will be a lot more coming your way very soon. And we will see you next time on the show.